Hello, we'll be talking about Mexico in the 19th century. We'll start with the basics. We'll make a small summary of the topics. Society classes in the 19th century were divided in two major sections, high class and rural class. The high class was the most wealthiest and politically influential class. They were the rich class. Then, at the bottom of the pyramid class was the rural class. They were the poorest class in the country at that time. They usually worked in rural environments as agriculturists, but sometimes as miners as well. They had almost no political influence at that time. These classes were the most present in the 19th century. Then, we'll talk about religion. Religion at that time was mostly Catholic, but because of the Constitution of 1857 that demanded the separation of the church from state, it was reduced by 2.7%. Approaching Mexican culture at that time, we'll describe the traditions in general way of thinking of the society at that time, as well as the cultural syncretism between traditions and technological developments at that time. Now, we'll talk about government and politics in Mexico in the 19th century. So we will interview our friend, Mr. Hermosillo, graduated from Tech. Hello, Mr. Hermosillo. How are you?
It's a pleasure to be in your program. Thank you very much.
Could you tell us something about, government and politics in Mexico in the 19th century, please?
Of course, we can start back in 1521, when the Spaniards conquered Mexico. From 1521 to 1807, New Spain, now Mexico, was ruled by the Spanish crown.
In 1807, Spanish minister Manuel Godoy signed with Napoleon the treaties of Fontainebleau. In these treaties, the French could enter and establish themselves freely in the Spanish territories with the purpose of invading Portugal. In reality, this treaty only possibilitated the French occupation of Spain. Due to a lack of sovereign, the Creoles and Peninsulars in New Spain asked who should they obey. The opinions divided in two. On one side, the members of the audience of Mexico, most of them Peninsular, recommended that they should wait a little bit to see if the situation in Spain calmed down. Nevertheless, the members of the Ayuntamiento de la Ciudad de Mexico, in the majority Creoles, did not think the same way. They proposed that New Spain should organize their own government, while Ferdinand VII came back to the throne. This division only let one situation clear: the already existing tension between Creoles and Peninsulars. From 1821 to 1823, the First Mexican Empire was established. It was ruled by Agustín de Iturbide, who managed the empire with very low economy rates, as well as annexed great pieces of land to it. The characteristics of the liberal court was the promulgation of the separation of state and church, and the conviction that the government should be republican, and the abolition of privileges. By the other hand, the conservative way of thinking, characterized by maintaining the union with the Catholic religion and installing a government of a monarchic type. Due to the political tensions, in March 1854, the Revolution of Ayutla started. This movement opposed the absolute power of President López de Santa Anna. In August of 1855, the Santanistas lost and Santa Anna abandoned the country. This was a perfect chance for liberals to take power. The task of governing would not be easy. Between 1855 and 1859, the laws of reform were promulgated. They were liberal, and they limited the attributions of church and militia and regulated the faculties of state. A fundamental moment in the life of Mexican politics was the formation of the Congreso Constituyente of 1856, which as a result gave the promulgation of the Constitución Liberal of 1857 that would rule the nation during the next 60 years. In 1862, the French troops invaded Mexico because President Benito Juárez postponed the debt with France. This war is called the Puebla Battle, in which Mexican troops, commanded by Ignacio Zaragoza, fought against the French, resulting victorious. Later, by 1863, the French invaded again and resulted victorious. As a result, they established a second empire in Mexico, which was ruled by Maximiliano de Habsburgo, who arrived to Mexico in 1864. Maximiliano de Habsburgo had a liberalist form of government, which created instability in the country with the conservative society that had supported him. In 1867, the Second Mexican Empire was finally dissolved.
Well, now we are going to ask a specialist about the main Mexican conflicts during the 19th century. Hello, Manuel.
Hello.
Could you tell us something about the topic?
Yeah, sure. During the 19th century, Mexico had two main conflicts: the French intervention and the Mexican independence. Now I'm going to talk about it.
The conflict known as the Mexican Independence began in the night of the 16th of September of 1810, when Miguel Hidalgo the priest gave the well-known Grito de Dolores. The conflict ended in September 27 in 1821. During this movement, there were three stages: 1. Inicio, 2. Organización, 3. Resistencia y Consumación, and now a brief introduction to each one of them. Inicio began in 1810 with Miguel Hidalgo, which his main purpose was to stop the Spanish government in the colony. It was a disorganized movement composed by the lower classes of the society. It ended in 1811 with the death of Miguel Hidalgo in the state of Chihuahua. Organización began in 1811 with Morelos, which his main purpose was to organize his army. By 1813, in the Anáhuac Congress, he wrote Los Sentimientos de la Nación. In 1814, he promulgated the Constitution of Apatzingán. Finally, this period ended with the death of Morelos in 1815 in Ecatepec. Consumación began in 1816 with Guadalupe Victoria and Vicente Guerrero. This period is called Guerra de Guerrillas. In 1820, the Constitution of Cádiz was established, leading to Spanish conspirations in the Templo de la Profesa. In 1821, the Plan de Iguala was proclaimed. Iturbide declared the Mexican independence with los Tratados de Córdoba. Those were signed by him and Viceroy O'Donoghue. As a result, the Mexican independence was reached.
Now we are going to talk with a specialist about the post-independence economic crisis in the 19th century. Hello, Regina. Could you tell us something about the topic?
Of course. The economic situation of Mexico after the independence was a dire one. The government was in collapse and the economy was in crisis. The new republic had trouble controlling the new form of government, and the population was mostly left without jobs. Those who had dedicated themselves to crafts, mining and textiles became unemployed and turned to crime. The soldiers that had abandoned their jobs to fight in the War of Independence became bandits and pirates. The crisis only got bigger because of the many civil wars going on between feuding groups. Because of the War of Reform, Mexico had great debts with foreign powers like Great Britain, France and the United States. In 1861, the debt had reached such heights that these foreign powers decided to invade Mexico. Great Britain and Spain agreed with Mexico to receive annual fees with interest in exchange for peace, but France would not leave. Thus started the Second French Intervention. This helped the Mexican economy because it established tighter bonds with Europe, but it also caused great internal unrest and debilitated the local economy. Economic betterment during the Porfiriato. In the 30 years of presidency by Porfirio Díaz, known as the Porfiriato, Mexico achieved the greatest economic prowess it had ever known. For the first time, Mexico as a republic was earning more than it spent. The great economic development by Díaz, powered by the expansion of the railroad, first put Mexico on the list as a global trade partner. It might be that this economic betterment was at the expense of its people, but the results were the creation of a middle class and the encouragement of foreign trade that led to a more modern Mexico. The agriculture was not as strong, but the true industrialization of Mexico began in this period.
I want to tell you about an important period of time in the Mexican history at the end of the 19th century called El Porfiriato.
Díaz arose to power in 1876 and ruled up to 1910. He re-elected himself several times for governing the country. Many political, social, and economic issues occurred during this period of time because the Mexican society had really low incomes, as well as a great instability was present among the country. Just a very small percentage of the society had good living rates, but the rest of it had a really difficult life because of the lack of jobs, as well as the form of government that affected the country. These aspects made the poor rates to increase. Nevertheless, Mexico had a great progress in many aspects of the country. The President Porfirio Díaz increased the ways of transportation among the country by implementing the railway. Also, he improved the commerce with other countries and integrated many external industries to the economic Mexican life.